Only now did Al Capone return to Chicago. His body was driven to Mount Carmel Cemetery, where most of the mourners were pressmen. It was a modest send-off for the most notorious gangster of all time. After Capone had been thrown out of Chicago, his crime syndicate continued to flourish. The Chicago Outfit, as it calls itself, invested its bootleg millions in both criminal and legitimate business. It was now one of the richest corporations in America. Al Capone was succeeded as boss of the outfit by his longtime bodyguard and gunman, Frank Nitti. Nitti committed suicide rather than go to jail. He was succeeded by Paul Ricca, another Capone killer. He did go to jail, and by the mid-1940s, Anthony Accardo was running the Chicago mob. In 1958, Accardo, another Capone hitman, faced persistent questioning about his past from Robert Kennedy.
Now, Mr. Accardo, in 1931, you and 4 other of the Capone syndicate, including Paul Labriola's stepfather, were seized in raids following the torch slaying of Mike Heitler. Is that correct? H-E-I-T-L-E-R.
I decline to answer.
Mr. Heitler was burned to death, was he?
I decline to answer.
Can you, what grounds?
On the grounds that it may tend to incriminate or lead me into something.
Why was it selected to burn, that he should be burned to death?
I decline to answer.
Accardo took the Fifth Amendment to fend off claims from Kennedy that he had been a killer for Capone and was now Chicago's most powerful gangster.
Did you have all the leading gangsters in the United States to your 4th of July party?
Decline to answer.
Here's a man who's been a force in organized crime for parts of 7 decades. You can believe that. He was a bodyguard, a hitman, a killer for Al Capone in the 1920s. Under Nitti, he was a strong-arm guy, and he started to rise to power. And in 1940s, actually, he ascended to the throne. He was the #1 guy.
In 1957, Accardo handed over the job of Chicago's crime boss to Sam Giancana. He was yet another Prohibition gunman who had worked with Accardo for years. Giancana became boss at just the wrong time. For years, the Chicago outfit had been protected by local police and politicians, but now the FBI began to investigate the city's top hoodlums. FBI agents put Giancana under the closest surveillance. Bill Romer followed him everywhere.
No matter where he went, we were going to stay with him right by his side. If he went to the toilet in a restaurant, we would go right with him and stand by him while he tended to himself. No matter what he did, if he was eating, whether he was golfing, whatever it was that he did. I knew from the extensive background investigation that I had conducted on Giancana that he was an animal. The guy was a beast, really, and he'd raped and killed and murdered and tortured, and that was the way he ascended to power, to become the #1 guy. He had to do what they call make his bones. In order to make your bones, you have to get involved in what they call the heavy work, and he was a master at the heavy work. And realizing that, I felt no problems whatsoever in conducting a hard surveillance of Giancana.
The FBI followed not only Giancana, but also his beautiful mistresses. Phyllis McGuire, the popular singer, was with him when he flew into Chicago in 1961. FBI men were at the airport to serve her with an order to testify about her mafia boyfriend. To Giancana's fury, they took Phyllis away.
Has this hurt your career?
I hope not. I hope it hasn't.
Has your association with Giancana in the past hurt your career, do you think?
I'm very warm.
Giancana was just livid. He became the animal that he really was at that time, and he tore into me in public. We were in the public waiting room of the terminal there at the airport at O'Hare with 100 perhaps people around, and he called me every name that you can think of, every obscene name that you can think of. I called everybody else around and I said, you people are just passing through Chicago. You don't have to live with this scum, this slime right here. And I pointed to Giancana. He just became hysterical. And he told me, he said, Romer, you lit a fire tonight that'll never go out. He said, Romer, This you will never forget. You will rue the day that you ever did this tonight.
Another of Giancana's lovers was Judith Exner, an artist from Hollywood. She was introduced to Sam by the singer Frank Sinatra. She heard all about Giancana's encounters with Roma and his colleagues.
Giancana had a long war with the FBI. What did he tell you about his attitude towards the FBI?
Oh, he was very bitter, and of course he had a very sometimes cavalier attitude about it. He would make jokes about having outwitted them. I think at one time he won a harassment suit in the courts in Chicago against them, but he naturally was very bitter about their constant surveillance.
One place the FBI kept under surveillance was the Armory Lounge on Chicago's west side. This was Giancana's headquarters. The FBI bugged the table where he met his mafia lieutenants and talked business.
The Armory it seemed to be Sam's headquarters in a sense, because a great many people used to come and see him. I would arrive in Chicago and check into my hotel. I used to stay at the Ambassador East, and he would come to pick me up, and we'd go straight to the Armory and spend hours on end when it wasn't open. And there were always people coming in to see him, and he used to kid because they wouldn't speak English. It was always Sicilian, and I would tease him about it, and several times he would say, "You don't want to know what we're talking about."
Judith Exner was also the lover of John F. Kennedy. Their affair began while Kennedy was campaigning to become President of the United States. After Kennedy had won the election, their love affair continued in the White House. Throughout this time, Kennedy knew that Judith was also seeing the mafia boss of Chicago.
He knew of Sam. He used to ask me, did I talk to Sam? He knew any time I was in Chicago, I would leave Washington and very often stop and sometimes just have dinner with Sam. He knew. He would ask me, are you stopping in Chicago? A couple of times he got upset. He said, you're seeing too much of Sam. Sam, on the other hand, wanted me to stop seeing Jack. He wanted a relationship. He didn't force it, but he wanted a relationship. He didn't like Jack. At least that's what he said to me. At one point in our relationship, in our friendship, he said, your boyfriend wouldn't even be president if it wasn't for me.
That's a very interesting point. Now, what did he explain to you?
He didn't explain anything. The only thing that in later years that it meant to me was the report that a great many votes had been stolen, and a great many votes that there had been some illegal activity as far as the voting in Chicago and Cook County, and Sam claimed responsibility for it.
In January 1961, John F. Kennedy became America's 35th president. He had been elected in the closest race this century.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
that you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
And will...
If Kennedy had lost Chicago and the state of Illinois, he could have lost the presidency. Kennedy might never have taken the oath, but for the efforts of Sam Giancana, the mafia boss of Chicago.
Of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Giancana assisted the election of Kennedy. If Kennedy hadn't won Illinois, he would have been very, very hard-pressed to win the election. It was that tight. And Mayor Daley, of course, helped considerably, but Giancana, with his control of the West Side bloc and the politicians that were under his influence and control in Chicago, materially assisted in the election of John Kennedy.
Having helped Kennedy, Giancana believed the president would get the FBI off his back. Instead, he made his brother Attorney General to lead a new fight against the mob.
In every assignment he has undertaken, I believe that he has distinguished himself.
His work with the Rackets Committee, on which I served, showed his intellectual energy, his courage, his integrity, and his organizing ability.
I am pleased to accept the position of the Attorney Generalship of the United States.
Robert Kennedy was a very, very dedicated and capable crime fighter. And he recognized that in Chicago, organized crime was at the height of its power and more dangerous perhaps than any place else, and that the leader, Sam Giancana, was a very, very capable, a very, very aggressive guy, and that he should be the #1 target of organized crime investigations in the United States.
What guidance did Kennedy give you?
Probably for the first time in the history of massive law enforcement, national law enforcement in the city of Chicago, we had absolute 100% backing. Whatever was needed within the realm of legality was always available at a moment's notice.
But the CIA, America's Central Intelligence Agency, was employing the Chicago mob at the same time as the Kennedys were fighting them. A few months before the presidential election, the CIA approached Sam Giancana through his lieutenant, Johnny Roselli. Roselli and Giancana were contracted by the CIA to murder Fidel Castro. The agency wanted Cuba's new revolutionary leader dead because he was anti-American and a communist. The mafia wanted Castro dead for another reason. Since the 1930s, American mobsters had run casinos on Cuba. Heavy gamblers were flown into Havana and fleeced of their fortunes. Most of America's crime families had a piece of the action. In 1960,